One nation, one tax could soon be a reality because the Select Committee on GST today submitted its report to the Rajya Sabha, upholding the state's demand for revenue compensation for 5 years. States will also get to levy an additional up to 1% tax for the first 2 years and retain the rights to tax fuel, alcohol, electricity and tobacco products. But political bickerings continue. The main opposition, that's the Congress party, refused to endorse the report, giving a dissent note stating that the GST bill in its current form is self-defeating in nature, even as the government said it will do whatever it takes to make GST a reality.
Finance Minister Arun Jaitley today hit out at the Congress for its double standards. ET now learns Team Modi's strategies to isolate the Congress by winning the support of smaller parties. It has been partly successful, getting BJP, NCP, TMC and even the Samajwadi Party on board. The Congress, on the other hand, is eyeing ADMK and the left parties to floor the bill in the Rajya Sabha. Economists and political experts say it's a now or never moment for GST, which has been in the works for decades now. So will it meet the April 2016 deadline, or is it going to be back to square one? That's our top story on Business Tonight.
It's often been called India's most awaited and perhaps the most ambitious indirect tax reform. The goods and the services tax intends to make India a unified tax market, like a lot of its advanced global peers. And which is why the Select Panel's report submitted today is a significant milestone in this journey of the tax reform. The 21-member panel bats for compensation to states for any revenue loss for the first 5 years, and which is why the government has agreed to amend Section 19 of the GST Bill to make a provision for it. The panel also suggests that states can levy additional tax of up to 1% for the first 2 years, a move that has evoked a dissent note from the Congress party. The panel bats for centre representation in the GST Council at 1/3, which has upset the left parties, who insist it be reduced to a fourth. The panel has suggested to keep tax grocers like the alcohol, petroleum and tobacco products out of the GST ambit. The Congress wants alcohol, petroleum and tobacco to be included. It also wants the additional 1% levy to go, alleging it will disrupt a unified tax market. And that has of course evoked sharp reactions from the Finance Minister.
It's hardly a dissent against the bill. It's a dissent against the Congress party's own proposals which were originally given. Alcohol को बाहर रखा जाए, ये 100% कांग्रेस के मुख्यमंत्रियों का कहना है.
Jaitley further insists that the Congress is changing positions on the GST raises serious questions on the party's credibility.
जो भी सुझाव उन्होंने दिए हैं, वो अपने बिल के खिलाफ, जो स्टैंडिंग कमेटी की रिकमेंडेशंस कांग्रेस के वित्त मंत्रियों ने स्वीकार की थी उसके खिलाफ, और कांग्रेस के मुख्यमंत्रियों के रवैये के खिलाफ रही है.
The game-changing GST bill, which will now have to pass the litmus test in the House of Elders, and that's where whoever can muster the numbers will call the shots. For now, the government will focus to isolate the Congress, considering it has already cracked the opposition's unity and got the Trinamool, the Biju Janata Dal, the Samajwadi Party and the NCP to support the bill, while the Congress will work hard to get the AIADMK and the left on board. The Constitutional Amendment Bill is just the beginning of this grand reform. The states will have to then ratify the bill, the GST Council will then set the rate, and the government will definitely have to work at breakneck speed for this reform to be a reality on the 1st of April next year. With Gauri Dwivedi, Supriya, Shrinate, ET Now, New Delhi.
So is the GST in its current form a half-baked reform, and more importantly, will it keep its April 2016 deadline? Let's ask three experts who for sure will have answers to both those questions. It's a power-packed panel that we've got on the show this evening. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, member of the GST panel. We've got Derek O'Brien as well, Parliamentary Party Leader of TMC in Rajya Sabha. And we've got Surjit Bhalla, noted economist and CMD of Oxus Investments. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the big debate this evening. Let me start off with you, Rajeev. What's your sense? Is this the best that could have been done? You were a part of the panel. Surely this seems slightly half-baked. Is this the best that we could have done?
I think this is clearly a transformative indirect taxation regime that we are stepping into. And this is, as you know, has been through many years of consensus building between states and the center. And there is at the heart of this a genuine fear by the states that they will lose power on the ability to tax and their revenues. So in some ways, I think both your contentions are right. This is the best compromise GST first step. It is not the purest form of GST that you would expect, but it is the first step into what is clearly a completely new indirect taxation regime. It creates an open, free, unified Indian market, and it makes the cost of compliance for small businesses and consumers low. So I think, yes, it is not, to answer your question, it is not the purest definition of GST, but it is clearly a consensus that's been long in the making.
All right, your co-panelist on the select panel says this is not the purest form, but this is perhaps the best could have been done. Your critics say this is half-baked, it's flawed at many levels. What's your assessment finally? Is this the sixth, the fifth, the fourth best that we could have got in place? Derek O'Brien?
See, these terms like best and better are all comparative terms. From my party, the Trinamool Congress's point of view, we've made this promise about GST in 3 of our election manifestos in 2009, in 2011, and again in 2014. So we were keen that we deliver GST. And given the circumstances, I think it's good because the states, which some of the states had, including my state, had some objections. So those those points were taken on board. You know, we keep talking a lot about corporate federalism, and the BJP also keeps talking a lot about cooperative federalism, but in reality, they don't have any cooperative federalism at all. But GST was one example, good example, of how they actually did some good cooperative federalism. On the rest of it, they failed miserably. So yes, in the circumstances, it's a practical bill. And I just hope that we pass this bill in the current session of Parliament.
It's interesting to hear the opposition throw its weight behind the government on a crucial reform like this, heartening always for stakeholders like ourselves in the Indian economy. Dr. Surjit Bhalla, the question really is, both panel members believe, yes, there's been a compromise. The question that I'm putting forward to you is, this has been in legislation for decades now. Is the compromise worth it?
Well, you know, look, from my understanding, you're absolutely right that the GST has been going on for a decade. There's one compromise which I hope comes about, which is there's the 1% tax which is given on for certain states, for the benefit of certain states, goes away. Beyond that, I don't, you know, so that's if it stays in there, I think that's bad news in the sense that it doesn't belong there. But, you know, and alcohol and petroleum are outside of the purview for at least 2-3 years. There is the compromise of compensation to the states for the next 5 years. So all said and done, I think, you know, it's quite reasonable. Hopefully, look, we have to understand that petroleum taxes are a big part of the revenue for the states. We just saw in Delhi how flippantly Kejriwal raised the tax rate. This is a luxury that the states enjoy, and they want to preserve it for some time. So, you know, all said and done, I think we need these compromises. I think the GST is a very, very important piece of legislation, and I don't think the compromises, as you term them, are enough to make me worried about its usefulness.
But Dr. Bhalla, let's talk about one of the specific compromises, which is the additional levy of about 1%. Will this have a cascading effect and disrupt, you know, the whole national market as we're looking at things, or do you think the fear is slightly exaggerated?
I think it's probably over-exaggerated. Let's see what the final decision of the GST is. But I think, you know, while I can understand the alcohol and tobacco and petroleum for reasons I'm not completely in favor, but I can understand the reason for that. I must say I'm in the camp that says I don't understand the reason for the 1% extra tax. So, you know, it's not a make it or break it type of tax. And we'll have to see whether it does get retained in the end. But even let us say it was passed with all of this, I think it's still a very important piece of legislation.
Right. Derek, come in on that because, like Surjit was also pointing out, this 1% additional tax seems a little bizarre. Industry, corporate India is also a little irked by it because people believe that this is going to have a cascading effect. Congress has given a dissent note on this particular reason as well. Why do you support it? Why do you believe this fear is unfounded?
Because when we were doing this legislation, as far as my party was concerned, we don't produce legislation based on how the markets are going to react or how a certain section is going to react. We produce legislation or we back legislation which we believe is pro-people. It's pro-people, so it's pro-states, and the states will not be losing out. So I think if you look at it from that point of view, this is a good bill. Now if you look at could we have a pure GST in a country like India's with so many diverse requirements, this pure GST of keeping alcohol out, not giving 1%, these are impractical. And I think the other very key point to remember, legislation is just not done overnight. The empowered group of finance ministers of the different states of India have been working on this for a very, very long while. And in that, some recommendations were made. So I think everything was, obviously corporate India wanted it one way. If the stock market wanted it one way and got disappointed, well, I couldn't care less about the stock market.
Rajiv, I'm going to come to the other big thing that's irking a lot of people, and that's alcohol, petroleum, tobacco being kept out. But that's one of the reasons perhaps why states have come on board. Is there, however, merit in the argument that at a later stage, there could be inclusion of products like these? Does the bill have that flexibility, if at all?
Now look, I think the one that has been kept out is alcohol, petroleum and tobacco will be reviewed by the GST Council. The point is like this. I think as states get used to and the government of India starts getting used to the GST framework, and they will find themselves over the next 1 or 2 years that if you want to moderate the GST regime, that the exceptions that are being kept out of the GST must come in, because as you widen the tax base, the effective rates will go down. If you reduce a tax base, the effective rates for GST will go up. I think this is well understood by even people like me who are not economists or geniuses. So therefore, I believe it's a natural course of evolution of the GST, and there will be an evolution of GST. This is just the first step. I believe there will be a second, third and fourth step over time as things start becoming clear to states, as states start becoming more confident that the GST is actually helping boost their local economic growth, local consumption. I think states will become more comfortable about less and less exceptions to GST and bringing everything under the ambit of GST. And that will, in a sense, also cause the effective GST tax rates to come down as the base increases.
I wonder if, you're giving us a headline there, but Dr. Bhalla, I'm going to come to you because the government, like we've been pointing out, has given in on alcohol, petroleum, tobacco. Do you believe that's a working compromise? And especially two products, petroleum and tobacco, will be brought under the GST, in the course of the few years. Do you see that happening, realistically speaking?
Oh, I definitely see it happening, actually. Now, whether it's 2 years or 3 years is a matter of debate, but I definitely see that happening. And I think over time, 5 years or so and so forth, I see alcohol coming back in there. Look, this is, we have to move forward, and, the Finance Commission finally did the right thing, and I think congratulations to the government for accepting all of the recommendations of the Finance Commission, that basically states should have more discretion over what they're spending and over their resources. So that's a big benefit to the states. So therefore, I think the trade-off will be over time, look, you decide how to spend your money, and we all will together decide how to tax. So I think over time, it's written in the wall that these 3 taxes will be included in the GST. And I think as a part of transition, as a part of trying to get it passed, I think the compromise has been made.
Right. Rajiv, I know the rate of GST will be decided by the council, but reportedly 18% tax is being deliberated upon. In your view, isn't that too high given the rate at which we have GST in some of our peers?
No. I come from the school of thought that the GST must be as low as possible, because then compliance is made easier, the tax base widens, there is less evasion. So I come from that school of thought. So clearly, I don't have a predisposed view on what the number should be. There is a committee out there. The GST Council will decide what the revenue neutral rate is going to be. But I have urged in the committee meetings and outside that it is in the interest of the state governments and the union government to keep the rates as low as possible, because that is really what businesses, industry and consumers want. Simple, easy to comply with, and as large a base of consumers and manufacturers as possible that are adhering to the GST. So I would be comfortable with a number in the mid-teens, with a band of plus minus 2%.
But Surjit Bhalla, the consensus view is that that we're likely to see, or at least GST panel members believe that we're likely to see a revenue neutral rate in the early teens. What's your view?
18% happens to be a magic number around the world. And most countries converge on that. And I would think we should also converge to this. One interesting statistic on the 18% is that's been the average tax collection, tax to GDP ratio of the US for the last 120 years, if you exclude social security taxes. So, it's a fair number. It's a very reasonable number, and it is lower than the two sets of numbers that we've got, which is the state level taxation as well as central level taxation. No, I think anything much higher than 18% would be wrong. And I don't think anything lower than 18% is very feasible. So, yeah, it is a good magic number.
All right, we've discussed the comfortable economic questions. Let's get on to the politics of the GST. Dr. Bhalla, do you believe this could sail through this session of Parliament, or the political standoff will ensure it gets further delayed?
Well, that's a difficult question. Look, we all witnesses to hostages being taken in the political arena, and the Congress is very, very desperate in order to make at least some contribution, say, listen, we've done something, we've stopped the GST. So I think, and they have a large presence in the Rajya Sabha. I hope that both daylight and sense will prevail upon the Congress, and that the GST bill gets passed.
Rajeev, you're going to be sitting in the Rajya Sabha very soon, and hopefully, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, voting on that bill. What's your sense? Will it boil down to the numbers in the Rajya Sabha? Who can muster how many eventually?
No, and I hope it is not. It doesn't come to the show of muscle and show of power. The GST is a good thing for the country. It is really nothing to do with politics. It is a bill that has had many years of consensus building. It has had the UPA in it. It has had the NDA in it. It has got absolutely no political color. This is really about creating a new modern indirect taxation regime for this country. It has, in my opinion, I'm convinced, as are many, many people, it will be a force multiplier for our economy and for industrial growth. And so it is the right thing to do by the country and by every one of its citizens. I genuinely hope, and I appeal through you and through every other medium, that the parties get together around the GST bill. You can disrupt for the next 8 days, I don't care. But take 2 days out and let's pass this constitutional amendment bill, because it is really, really the right thing to do, and we must meet the April 2016 deadline.
Yes, we must meet that deadline. Derek, let you have the last word on this, because this is as much a political issue as it's an economic one. Do you believe the Congress stands isolated now on the GST? It has changed its position and done flip-flops on this. What's your view?
See, again, you may want to call it flip-flop. The Congress party may interpret it as, let's give them the same medicine back which they've been giving us for many years. So between the BJP and the Congress, it's got nothing to do with the Trinamool Congress. See, with Trinamool Congress, it's with this government, as always, it's ball by ball, bill by bill. So you bring a bill, if we think we can make some contribution to that bill in terms of making some positive amendments, if the government decides that one or two of the amendments we moved are in line with their thinking, and other states also think like us, we can move forward. Like on the land bill. On the land bill, we'll slam whatever possible break there is to slam and get this government who've gone berserk to try and pass this land bill. Just as much as we wanted to make a positive contribution to get GST passed, we'll put in just that much effort to stop the land bill.
Derek O'Brien, Rajeev Chandrasekhar and Surjit Bhalla, we appreciate you taking time out this evening and joining us on the GST, the big game changer, the reform that has been in the making for very long now, and one that we hope finally sees the light of day and does pass the litmus test as far as the Rajya Sabha is concerned. Thanks very much indeed.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.